if that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, so you're going to keep your screen on, so just put it on full screen.
Like slideshow?
Yeah. Excellent.
Looking good there? Is that?
Yep.
Yes, perfect.
Seeing everything? Okay. Hi, Andrea. Good to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Doing well. And we're going to wait a few minutes just as people figure out the tech and get to where they want to be. And then we'll get going. Bobby and Costanza, have you attended any of the hybrid sessions?
Yeah, there was some hiccups in one of them. It took about 15 minutes to work, but when it worked, it was fine.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
The one of Monica and Jason. I think we were all there together.
Yeah, I have a hybrid session tomorrow, and I'm going to be sending an email to the folks about what I've learned.
Oh,
today.
so you're organizing that?
I'm a co-organizer on another. Okay. Yeah.
I'm not organizing one, but I'm speaking at one tomorrow as well. So
it's a brave new world.
I'm organizing one, and I went to one this morning, and I was there in person in Seattle, but I was watching it unfold, the hybrid session, and still have some questions, but the basics worked.
Yeah, I mean, we've got like a couple of years experience with this now. When it works, it's beautiful. When it doesn't work, it's a fucking disaster.
Welcome, everyone. Sorry.
We have to do small groups, which we didn't experience this morning, so that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, the breakout rooms are the hardest to sort out in hybrid.
So I'm going to be fairly aggressive as the host in muting people.
Yeah.
Because I found that is helpful to keep the background noise down a little bit. Welcome. We're still waiting for people to filter in. Welcome, everyone. Glad to see folks are here. If you'd like to enter into the chat box where you're joining us from, even if it's a conference hotel room, we'd love to know. I'm in North Carolina in the United States. We have a series of wonderful thunderstorms that's been hanging out all day. So if I suddenly disappear, it's because we lost power, and Costanza will take over from there. I would also like to encourage everyone who feels comfortable to turn on your cameras so that we can have a bit more sense of community while we're here. And we're gonna get started pretty quickly now that folks have filtered in, because we have 60 minutes, and that's a fairly short amount of time for us to kick off what we are envisioning as a collaborative co-authorship of a paper. The PDW is a paper development workshop, which typically is developing many papers, but this one is developing a single paper. And we will talk more about that as we go along. Thank you for joining us, everyone. I see some familiar names here, and it's wonderful to have you join us. So the session that we are going to work together on today is about managing with and among more than human stakeholders. And the subtitle of the session is The Rise of Nature-Based Legal Persons. And as we'll go along, you'll see that the post-colon is kind of the thing that motivated me to get involved in this, and the pre-colon is kind of what got Costanza interested in working together on this project. We're going to spend the next 60 minutes on a couple different things. One is we're going to hear Bobby Banerjee talk about relational ontologies and whatever else Bobby wants to bring to the conversation. I'm going to introduce folks and give an overview of the PDW, and Costanza will talk a little bit about her work on some ontological issues as well. And then we're going to do a roundtable brainstorming session where we're going to ask all of you to contribute to this PDW, ideas, thoughts, examples of the phenomenon that we're talking about, that will then be fed into the next steps of the process where we have work meetings over the next few months, with the goal being a submission to the next AOM meeting, and that submission will be in January. And ideally over the summer, we'll develop that submission further into a journal journal submission for publication on this topic. After we do this brainstorming session, we'll come together and talk about how we can incorporate those ideas and talk about the next steps in a bit more detail. So let me start with introductions. I'm going to start with our guest, Bobby here. Bobby Banerjee is Professor of Management and Associate Dean of Research and Enterprise at Bayes Business School, formerly CAS, at City University of London. His primary research interests are in the areas of corporate social irresponsibility, sustainability, climate change, and resistance movements. Other research interests of his include critical management studies, indigenous ecology, and post-colonial studies. My co-organizer here, Costanza Sartoris, is a PhD student in management at Ca' Foscari University in Venice, Italy, and her research centers on how culture impacts the process of development of technological artifacts and how human and non-human interactions unfold, with a focus on plants. She does some really interesting work on plants. And I am Assistant Professor of Management at Walker College of Business at Appalachian State University, and my primary research interests are sustainable management and strategy. And I also work on knowledge production practices a bit. So now that our introductions have concluded, let's talk a bit more about the objectives. I want to point out two things here. One is this QR code in the right-hand corner. So that if you scan that with your phone, that will take you to a Google form where you can sign up to get invites for the next work sessions, which probably will happen in September, maybe October. There's also a URL that we will share in the chat. Costanza just shared that. So if you'd like to remain involved in this work, please sign up there so we can stay in touch with you. And then the deadlines are what I already mentioned. I'd like to briefly talk about the specific phenomenon that that brought me to this topic, which is the rise of nature-based legal persons. There are some lawyers that are arguing now in the US courts on behalf of natural entities, and a major news story finally covered some of this because a charismatic animal, an elephant, started to be represented in court by lawyers. The lawyers are arguing that the elephant has rights and it's being held against its will in a zoo. This is not the only example of this. It's just the most charismatic example of this, being an elephant. There are also 2 lakes, a marsh, and 2 streams that have sued to stop a Florida development. And Manumin, which is wild rice, is currently suing the state of Minnesota. So these are US examples, but this is part of a global trend with new kinds of legal persons. New Zealand's Wanganui River, which I think Bobby will talk about, became the first waterway in the world to get legal personhood. Ecuador granted rights to wild animals. Panama enacted rights of nature law. These things are happening across different legal regimes. And we think that this is important for several different areas of management theory and management in general. I will now pass to Costanza to talk a little bit about issues of power in this area.
Yes, well, thank Nicholas for the nice introduction. So I think what is interesting, because like why these, let's say, issues are emerging. Well, I think because somehow there is an issue of power here, of power kind of imbalance, because usually, like traditionally, especially in Western cultures, natural entities or like trees, plants, rivers, animals are usually perceived as resources, and as resources, they're perceived as passive, just to be exploited, a little bit like commons, the traditional tragedy of the commons problem. And this leads to have, let's say, natural entities as not able to express any form of agency. But actually, this is kind of misleading if we think, for instance, that all the problems that natural entities might create when, for instance, there are disasters or cataclysms, like usually in terms of legal standards, like agency is attributed when there are catastrophic events like fires, or for instance, from Venice, the floodings that destroys the city. And then countries even give money to the citizens in order to solve the problem caused by the natural entities itself. So it's kind of funny how basically we usually give agency to problematic fact, while now the trend is totally different, because somehow we're giving agency also to entities that are not causing harms, but actually most of the time usually to preserve these entities themselves. Nicholas, if you can move forward with the slides. And Actually, I think these reflect really an ontological sort of turn that is happening, not only in our disciplines, but especially in social sciences, because we've been hearing about the notion of agency since the 80s in our field by, Latour, the actor-actor theory, and so on. And the fact that none or other than or more than humans, it depends on from which theories you look at this phenomenon, have a form of agency relating with the humans. But what is interesting now is that somehow we are moving from this flat ontology where every actor is the same to more instead the power embedded ontologies like agential realism by Karen Barad, or new materialism, or even posthumanism like the one by Donna Haraway or Rosie Braidotti, where instead these imbalanced relationship between humans considering themselves sort of the master of nature are really challenged by other natural entities. And this is particularly clear when looking at, for instance, indigenous systems of knowledge and culture that are really grounded in this relational approach that I think Bobby will give us a nice speech about.
We're now going to turn to Bobby for his comments. Go ahead, Bobby, take it away.
Just go to share my screen. Can you guys see this?
Yep, looks great.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, guys, but I'm not sure about the distinguished bit. I think notorious is perhaps more appropriate in my case. And thanks for joining in wherever you are. I'm in sunny London, where it's now 8 p.m. on a Friday evening. And I have another session after this, which goes on past midnight. I really should be in a bar. One of the joys of online conferencing. I'm going to talk about what Constanza briefly mentioned about relational ontologies. Now, if you pick up any standard text on climate change, this is what you will see as the picture of what's happening, right? So here, for example, the way we organize our economy, our production patterns, our consumption patterns, right? Which in the last 200 years of capitalism has brought untold wealth to many people, lifted billions of people out of poverty, yeah, but also created inequalities and also created the environmental emergency we are at today. So this particular way we organized economy has certain effects, yeah. We have emissions, concentrations of greenhouse gases, for example, just to take one example. That then leads to changes in the climate in terms of sea level rises, fires, droughts, what we're seeing now. That then impacts, right, on the ecosystems. It changes landscapes, it dispossesses people in many ways, right? It affects our food. And that then brings us back to our thinking about how should we organize our economy given these constraints? What kind of industries have to die, right? What kind of energy mix we need to do, right? And then we focus on one is reducing the causes, of climate change. So we talk about mitigation, and that's not happening, which is now, I think we've passed that point, is how do we then adapt the consequences of climate change? Yeah. So this is a appealing model. It's intuitive. It's scientifically proven, policy-wise as well. I don't know if people are able to unmute themselves. Anyone see a problem with this? Just what's wrong with this picture? What's wrong with this picture? This is one way of looking at the world, yeah? One ontology. The problem with this is the separation between Earth and human systems. Now, there are many other cultures which don't have that separation, yeah? This is a Pachamama from the Aztecs, has a different relational ontology, that the human beings are not just part of it, they're integrated into, they're part of the same living creature, right? So the Earth is a living system. The Earth is alive. Now, Western science came to this conclusion about 30 years ago, and social sciences even perhaps more recently, that the Earth is a living system. Now, this was considered to be a dramatic breakthrough in Western natural science and social sciences, completely ignoring the fact that many cultures knew this 30,000 years ago. Yeah. So the Aztec is just one example, that there's no acknowledgement. There are many examples of indigenous ontologies from the Americas, from Australia, from New Zealand, from Asia, from Africa, but there was that no separation, right? So what is considered to be a breakthrough, let's just put that into a historical perspective. So what does this then mean practically? Yeah, I'm not going to read this out. This is from the United Nations UNFCCC website, talking about forests, right? So I'm not going to read this out. Protecting and enhancing forests, about climate change, so it can help in mitigation and adaptation. I'm not even going to talk about the fallacy of just planting trees is going to solve our emergency, but let's take that as a given, although it's wrong. But this is one way, right, of looking at the problem. The first example I showed you. These are Earth systems, and we need to fix this. Yeah, it reflects one ontology. There's another way to look at forests and trees. And the Thomson Highway, who's a Cree playwright, novelist, and author, says animals have souls, rocks have souls, trees are who, not what. Yeah. So you have the same planet, looked at it very differently. So when you look at it this way, your relationship is very different from than looking at forests as carbon absorbing entities. Yeah. Just to put this into historical perspective, we live in an era now which a lot of people call the Anthropocene. We evolved not as species. Life on the planet started about 4.5 billion years ago. We came into the party really late, and for that brief period of time, we sure caused a lot of damage as a species. The only difference between the species before us, who are now extinct or will be extinct, is that we are now causing our own extinction. That's the only difference between those species we become existed around. Now, so the Anthropocene then is, if you look at the literature, they call it a new epoch, where human beings now have displaced nature to become a dominant geological force. So the fossils we are leaving behind in the rocks already, which will be last for a few million years, are basically plastic. So we have actually become a geological force on the planet. With the Anthropocene, then there are two issues. One is the actual physical geological Anthropocene, which changes the physical properties. And there's a socioeconomic one. This is also the outcomes of a particular form of economy, right? That was a choice. It wasn't a natural kind of form, right, so to speak. The problem with this is Anthropocene, it is a colonial discourse. It constructs this singular notion of humanity, that we're all facing this global problem, which completely ignores the deep inequalities in society, right? And also deflects attention of how these inequalities are generated. The atmosphere has been used unequally for the past 250 years. So if the concept itself is problematic, we need to be vigilant about any solutions that emerge from this notion of this Anthropocene. And which is why I guess there is a call in some quarters to decolonize this. What does this mean? I talked about this dualism between humans and nature, a product of the Enlightenment, that we've used to have nature that's been transformed in the environment, which allows it to make it more manageable. Yeah. Now, this dualism, the decolonial scholars argue, is primarily responsible for the ecological crisis and therefore cannot be the basis for any meaningful solutions. Yeah. Carbon trading is not going to solve the climate emergency. And a lot of indigenous scholars are calling for a different kind of ontology in terms of trying to address this climate emergency. So yeah, relational ontology, apart from being a sexy word, what exactly does that mean? Yeah? So collapsing this nature-culture binary implies this relation ontology. So this is the case of the Whanganui River in New Zealand. After nearly 140 years of negotiation, the Maori tribe was able to obtain a court ruling which bestowed legal rights to this river, which means it must be treated as a living entity. This was granted personhood in 2017. It is the first river in the world to be recognized as an indivisible and living being. Now, this is a long story. The New Zealand government first said, look, why do we need to go to court? We've got environmental laws to protect this. We can use conservation. The Maori kept on saying, no, we might have the laws. This is our family. Yeah? This river is our ancestor, and no laws can protect it. And that was the reasoning they used. The reason they went to was that the New Zealand government was planning to privatize this water for power companies, right? Now, suddenly an ancestor now becomes transformed into private property, right? So this means that the river can act as a person in a court of law. It has legal standing. You can actually say that if the river has the right to flow in a particular way, and if you change its course by putting a dam, for example, it can appeal that decision, right? So it can come to court and say, you cannot change my course because I have a right as a living person. And therefore, local guardians have been appointed to determine the content of its rights. Yeah, and this is just the first case. One of the cases, Bolivia, Ecuador, India, and some regions, the US too, have passed similar laws, not granting personhood perhaps, but different kinds of rights as well. Yeah, and this is the representative council of Maori and also the local council from the Crown, who are appointed to speak for the river should any development project be either approved or initiated.
Bobby?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure, go ahead.
So Isabel shared in the chat a reference about paradigm shifts. And in the previous session today about more than human stakeholder methodologies for more than human stakeholders, there was a question, I think Frank Viggy asked, provocation question, which was, how does this then get incorporated into management? And what you just said about this board of directors basically having a new kind of power to interact with other organizations strikes me as one place where it matters.
Yes.
Is that the direction you're thinking? How are you seeing this mattering for management?
That's one case. The other thing is the right to say no to development. Now, most indigenous communities who consult with mining companies, the question is under what conditions can this project proceed? How much money, how many roads, how many hospitals, how many jobs? Never should this project proceed at all, right? So the right to say no to development, I think, is an issue which has to be brought in into any kind of corporate decision making. Yeah. So my point is, looking at this river, there's one particular ontology, right, of development. Now, one set of eyes, mindset, will look at this river and say, wow, look at this great river. I want to pour tons of concrete and steel into this, yeah? I want to build a dam, construct a reservoir, right? Centralized, channel the water, yeah? Privatize it and sell it to the golf courses and hotels nearby. That's one form of development. Another mindset will look at this river and say, I am the river and the river is me, right? That's a different ontology. So when you use that ontology, obviously decision-making changes quite profoundly. I'm just going to quickly talk about another case because I know we're tight on time. How does this work out in real life? I wrote a paper about a conflict involving an indigenous community in India between a mining company which wanted to put a bauxite mine, an aluminum oxide mine, on top of a mountain, which was where both the tribe lived, and it was a sacred site. And there was a major protest, one of the few success stories which a small tribe took on the might of the Indian government, took on the might of the mining company, and actually won that case, right? So these are two statements, bringing us back to Nicholas's question about how do we bring this to the boardrooms. So this is from the mission statement of the mining company. We believe our strategy, our business objectives will bring India into a good global leader in the metals mining market, yeah? Now, there's nothing wrong with the statement. India, despite what you see on TV, is still a very poor country, and for poor countries, resource extraction and selling commodity products is the best, cheapest way to get foreign exchange and income, right? So nobody's going to argue with the statement, right? Creates jobs, wealth. The problem is the people who live on the mine have a slightly different approach to the mountain. Nyamgiri is the name of the mountain. They talk about we lose the mountain, we end up in trouble. We lose our soul. Now, I don't know about you guys. Economics 101 tells me that mountain as a soul is not a particularly good return on asset. Okay? What is the net present value of a soul, right? The problem is this guy is right as well. Even the chairman of Vedanta is not going to argue with him. The tribe has been living there for God knows 10,000 years. They worship that mountain. Nobody has a problem with that. Yeah. So what happens now when you've got two rights? They're both right. As a wise man taught us a couple of 100 years ago, when you have two rights, force decides. And that's precisely what happened. The government sent in the army and police trying to quell the resistance. Because contrary to the premise of the global economic paradigm, right, it is impossible to have one universal metric for comparing and exchanging the real values of nature amongst different groups of people, different cultures. Yeah, this is the question of power, which Constanza alluded to earlier, right? This is the fundamental problem. There is no win-win situation here. You cannot integrate. You cannot build an environmentally friendly mind. Either the community has to die or the mind cannot be built. Yeah, this is a zero-sum game, right? So let me end with this. As I said, before we talk about business as usual, unless we really change dramatically what we want to do, we are certainly facing this notion of species extinction, which might not be a bad thing for the planet. But it's important to realize that let's not get too carried away with this so-called revolutionary aspect of giving rights to nature. It's not particularly revolutionary because we already have environmental legislation. The problem with any rights discourse, like the human rights discourse, they can simply become the right to have rights. Yeah, I have lots of problems with this Western notion of rights. Rights undermine relationships like community, solidarity, love. Yeah, they don't talk about those issues. Enforcement remains weak. The examples I gave you about Bolivia, Ecuador, 6 months after passing these laws in the Constitution, mega development projects were approved on the same lands, right? So yes, you have these laws in place, right? So we need to make this relationship shift, I guess, in our thinking, in different ways of relating to the natural world. Otherwise, we run the risk of becoming, as I said many times, the only species in the planet with sufficient intelligence to foresee our own imminent extinction, but too foolish to do anything about it. Thank you for your time and attention, folks. And I hope I was on time. Yes, I was.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Bobby. Yes. So in the interest of pushing forward to getting to the collaborative section of our agenda here, I'm going to cover just one more thing related to what Bobby just ended on, which is in this slide that I need to share. So let me share this. This has a somewhat unwieldy name. This is from the Summary for Policymakers of the Methodological Assessment of the Diverse Values and Valuation of Nature of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. I apologize for the low resolution of this. The document couldn't pull anything better from the document, but what I want to highlight here is something that Bobby was just talking about, which is this difference between concepts of living from or living in or living with or living as nature. And this document is a wonderful read for understanding the diversity of approaches to the relationship between people and nature. And what I think is starting to happen, well, maybe starting to happen is the wrong way to put it. What I think is being talked about in these sessions about more than human stakeholders is a shift from this left-hand side of the anthropocentric view to the right-hand side of what they call bio and ecocentric, cosmocentric, pluricentric. And what we're now going to turn toward is a brainstorming session on how these paradigm shift ideas or these new relationships between nature and organizations, nature and people, not new relationships in general, but maybe new to some spaces of academia and research, what implications they have for stakeholder theory or other theories or other frameworks that we talk about. We're going to deal with some technical issues here. I'm just going to prepare everybody in advance because what we're going to ask you to do is open a separate website where we can all collaborate to share ideas. Costanza, I will let you take over here to guide us through this. I think you already put the URL in the chat, but I'll do that right now.
I just shared it.
Yes.
So thank you, Nicholas. So here, for the ones of you who have maybe a phone or whatever and want to scan the QR code, you can. Otherwise, you just click through the link. You will be redirected into a very nice Padlet. Maybe, Nicholas, you can just move to the Padlet. Okay, if for the ones who don't know these two, there is a nice red button at the bottom right corner of the page where you can click. It transforms into a nice pen and you can add all your thoughts and ideas and, I don't know, theories or whatever. You just click publish. It appears on the screen and you can move it around where you think it would fit better. So please try. It should be one of the easiest tools to be used. Also, if you see that there are some ideas that you like, there is a nice simple way to like what other people have posted by clicking the art. So we can all collectively see what are the topics that we are more interested on, and we have now about 10 minutes, if I'm right, to play somehow this game all together and try to brainstorm together.
Yeah, and the idea here is something brought you to this session. There's something that interests you about this idea. And we're trying to capture all of that. We're trying to understand what the academics in this space are thinking about and how we might incorporate that into a review of this research space for the submission that we're going to develop. Okay, please raise your hand if you can't access the Padlet, and I will help everybody walk through this.
In the chat, either to me or to Nicholas, and we will try to help you. Eventually, you can also write directly and we can add your thoughts, ideas.
Costanza, we're getting some robot voice from you.
But sorry, probably I changed the...
No, I think it's the internet connection issues.
Okay.
No problem. Someone asked in the chat if I can share the article that I just covered. I'm assuming that's the IPBS article, so I will put that in the chat as well. Let me find that now. Yeah, and I see Simon, you put your name at the end. If you'd like to put your name at the end of your contribution, that would be perfectly fine. There's no easy default way on Padlet to associate who is contributing what, unfortunately, but you can add that to your comment. James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis. Yeah, I think Lovelock just passed away.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm showing, I think I'm, Costanza, am I still sharing the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm showing how, because I like this comment, I'm showing how you can indicate comments that you agree with or that you also have. There's a little heart in the bottom left.
Okay, for a very long post, I will move these, the glacier. Okay, thanks. Someone just did it, just to make it easier for everyone to read. Unfortunately, the space is not very big.
Costanza, are you kind of managing the organization of the Padlet?
Well, I'm seeing everyone is pretty skilled in doing this. Like many years of COVID makes us great with technology.
This certainly is a conference of still learning the new tools for the virtual environment.
There's some great questions already.
Yeah. I think this is a super exciting space, and I'm really glad that we have a group of people here today who are interested in working on this. All right, Jason, we need to have a coffee and talk about quantum theory, apparently. That would be how we can all be tenured and untenured simultaneously, and it's only when someone observes us that we know which we are.
Exactly. And yeah, exactly. Anytime.
Oh, this PRME working group thing sounds neat too. This assessment to map and profile where someone is on the mind shift journey. That would be amazing. It would be so amazing to send that to a survey of managers to see where they end up on that. Andrea, in the bottom right-hand corner of the Padlet screen, there is a plus sign that turns into a pencil. You click on that, and then you can type in a very short kind of description of the item. And then at the bottom, you can elaborate and then hit publish. That should get you there.
How are we doing
In the
on time?
meanwhile, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, we have
We
until
still have,
45.
Yes, I think we can have still few minutes still. I think
Yeah.
some people are still typing, and
Excellent.
then we try to open up the floor also by, talking, not only writing.
Yeah.
I'm trying to create room in this big, incredible brainstorming of notes, questions. I will move some major categories a bit apart so we can see better every post.
Yeah, I love this point about who manages whom. If legal entities start to have managing boards, who will be appointed to manage them. I was having a conversation with someone else about.
Well, I might have put it in.
Oh, that's yours. Or maybe I was having this conversation with you. But if you look at nonprofit management, at least in the context that I'm familiar with, public affairs schools tend to teach that rather than business schools. So if there's going to be this rise of a profession to serve on these boards of nature-based entities, is that something business schools should be training people? Is that going to be done in public? I mean, I think that's an interesting organizational question too.
Okay, I feel we need more space.
And see if we can get the thoughts of orangutans on oil palm plantations. Probably not super supportive. Okay, Costanza, should we move to a more open discussion? I think we've generated a wealth of ideas here.
Yes, that's good.
So I think unless Costanza or Bobby, you have a different way you'd like to do this, I think we'll open to a general discussion for a while. If you have,
Yeah, I think that would be good.
if you have a comment you'd like to make or elaborate on, please raise your hand, and then we can call on you, or put it in the chat if you're not in a situation where you can unmute. I think in the online environment, cold calling is more effective and more necessary than in the in-person environment. So I would like to ask Jason, could you elaborate a bit on the quantum theory idea? Because I'm being selfish and that's interesting to me, and I'd like to hear more.
Yeah, I mean, I've been searching for years how to understand this relationality of humans and nature through the lens of commercial fishing. And it's only so that the captains I studied had this saying of, and I studied these trawl captains had the saying of, you never know until you tow. You never know what you're going to catch until you catch it. And then there's this, everybody else is telling them, well, you have to know before you tow. You have to know, you have to catch exactly what you can. There's this issue of bycatch. And long story short, quantum theory has been the only sort of way that I can understand this problem of, through which what we know only comes about through our actions. And I mean, and I know that that's going to sound very familiar to a lot of people who take a practice view, but I think long story short is, they've been struggling with this question for a long time. This question of the apparatus, and anybody who's read Barad will tell you that everything we sort of have or know is a product of our, well, that they argue, I won't claim this to be the thing, is a product of our the apparatus of our activities. So I hope that sort of gets to the point. But
Yeah.
But one more thing. What I think is really interesting, though, is that, so I've been looking at quantum theory, and then working with Brian Houston on this indigenous perspective, Nelta Leetsley, and they're largely saying the same thing. This indigenous society has been looking at this sort of way, it's been looking at the world through this practice type lens, non-dualistic lens, for hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same way that these, rarefied scientists doing scientific experiments have been what they came to as well. So it's I think that's really fascinating and really telling.
Yeah, I find myself saying things like, this is a new thing, and I know it's not. I know it's new to me, but I know that it's not new, and I need to be really careful about that. Bobby, did you have a comment there? You turned your camera back on.
Yeah, but that's the part which Constanza talked about. This is power at its best in terms of how it works. So for this knowledge was subjugated, was denied for thousands of years. Yeah, people would be put to jail for practicing this kind of stuff. It was witchcraft, it was voodoo, right? And now, because it's been quote unquote rediscovered in a lab, it's now suddenly become an incredible breakthrough. So this notion of these mycorrhizal networks, where only about 20 years ago, people found that trees actually talk to each other. And again, the indigenous people knew that all along. And suddenly this is now hailed as an incredible discovery about, fungi deciding which trees should actually get nutrition and which should not. It's an act of agency, right, in many ways. So, I mean, I think that's what pisses off a lot of the tribal people, saying, first you take this knowledge, first you deny it, and then you take it, and then you patent it. And then we're kind of left in the same position they were in. And this is the ethical part as well. As researchers, what is the point of talking about all of this when, in the real world, places like Brazil and Peru and Chile, the government is opening up swathes of land for mining. So what is the whole point of talking about these wonderful ontologies when in the real practical world, the exact opposite is happening, right? So you cannot separate this knowledge, so-called scientific knowledge, from a very practical political issue. You cannot separate indigenous knowledge from land rights. You can't talk about indigenous ecology and ontology without talking about human rights, without talking about land rights, right? So that ultimately is the notion of governance, the notion of self-determination, of autonomy. And that's what I meant about saying the right to say no.
And some of this is also, yes, just academics like us sitting and talking about this, there's not a clear relationship to how that matters to other things. On the other hand, what has the imprimatur of science or of academic knowledge is related to power as well, because that gets pulled into policymaking, that gets pulled into business decision making. So some of what the earlier session today about more than human methodologies seemed to be about was which ontologies are privileged in which spaces. And one thing that I think is changing with the rise of these nature-based legal persons is, oh, this ontology that an elephant or an orangutan can have legal rights is now moving into spaces it hasn't existed in before. And Costanza, this gets to your point about power, about different groups, different things having power. And I think that matters quite a bit for management theory, the thing we talk about. Any comments that folks would like to make about other
actually,
topics?
I can jump in. I was a bit lost in creating order. Oops, good to tell. on the fact that, and actually, what I've noticed is that we have a lot of questions, few methodological ideas, many theories, and some, I think, practical implications that I think are very interesting. I will read them loud. So, like, again, someone, Jason, it's you, many cases from which you asked in which people were given legal status but still kept separate. I think this really goes back to what Bobby was saying in his speech, like what is happening in Bolivia or Peru. And I really like this post of being fearful and subject/object experiencing. So how do we actually really shift our mindset also as researchers, since we grow up and learn within contemporary societies? And I think they are very interesting posts. And we have also a very nice inspiration post, like the notion of vandalism and development, and a nice picture of a girl being hugged by a gorilla. And this is great. I don't know if someone who wrote these posts wants to pick up, or
I would love to hear from Monica about this ventriloquism idea, if you'd be willing to talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. So coming from the organizational communication field, I did a lot of work already on, if you come more from a technology perspective, on who is speaking through whom and what does this mean for creating an organization or for organizing in general. And I think especially for these questions we heard is like, who can speak for the river at the end? Like, how can we transform these natural beings into a managerial discourse? We need some sort of conversation like happening. So there will be always something that has to speak for someone else. And what ventriloquism changes here as a methodology is this, that only humans can speak for others. So they are working with these concepts of to be a figure and to be a vent. And for example, a human can also be a vent for a river. So the river makes you speak, for example, and you can speak for the river, which again comes then with power dimensions of appropriating something or being possessed by something. So I think these notions, especially in a legal discourse, could help to like some sort of entangle these ways of how things move and coming together or falling apart again through these materializations in communication.
Is that concept applied to companies as legal persons, as legal fictions? I think it's been so long that companies have had this recognition that we kind of take it for granted, but is it talked about in that space the same way?
Yeah, it's especially prominent in meetings. For example, if you have different companies working together, so in intercompany meetings of who can speak for whom and who is speaking for the manager and who is speaking for the company and who is speaking for him or herself. So far it's predominantly in a very managerial discourse. However, it's also acknowledges like these non-human entities. So far, very limited in a natural sense, but I think there could be potential in changing that.
I mean, the 1857 court decision of making companies artificial person allows them to sue and to be sued. That was actually the rationale taken. If you look at, I think his name was John Stowe in 1972 in the US. Sierra Club, the environmentalist group, filed a case against a company who, for environmental vandalism. And the court threw it out, saying that you have no right as an environmental agency. Who are you? It's not your property. It's forest land, right? It's whereas the company's is property, right? So that was the rationale for saying, if this organization cannot speak for this forest legally, whereas the company can speak for itself in destroying the forest, how do we then give this forest a right? Because an environmental organization is not allowed to speak for this forest, because an environmental organization is not a legal entity on behalf of the forest. That was the rationale about, do trees have rights, right? And that kind of died away after the 1970s, mainly because the environmental laws started coming into place in the US, and now it's being relooked at. That was the constitutional basis of Bolivia and Ecuador as well. the same kind of principle.
And
But
one of
also-
the, go ahead.
Just very quick. It's also important to note that it's not just nature which is getting these rights, right? In some cases, very specific. It's a river or a mountain or a tree. So it doesn't mean all of nature gets this. In some other cases, it's a bit more ambiguous. That yes, it's not about nature being a person, but if its rights are being infringed on, then legally we can do something. Sorry, go ahead, Nicholas.
No, you're just reminding me of one of the early papers that is explicitly about legal standing is Mark Starrick has a 95 paper on should trees have managerial standing. And it's based on a 1972 law review paper that should
That's right.
trees have standing, end of
Yes.
sentence. So that I
That's
think
right.
that legal this conversation in the legal tradition probably is one of the most deeply rooted conversations that we could bring into the management conversation. And it is explicitly about what is and isn't property. What does and does not have the status of property, and then that determines how it can be acted on by others. Or as you said, Bobby, how it can refuse to be acted upon. Andrea and Isabel shared a couple interesting things in the chat. Andrea said one of the doctoral students I'm working with is using ventriloquism as a method and a lens, using video-based observation as a method. That's very interesting to hear about the method that's being used to study that. Andrea, if you'd like to elaborate on that, I'd love to hear more.
And there's also a comment by Catherine later on. She wanted to speak. So yeah, Andrea, go ahead.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
no, just quickly on the ventriloquism as a lens and as a theory is new to me. The student is the one that brought me to this, which is always appreciate that with doctoral students, because she comes from a communication perspective. But yeah, so she's looking at the intersection of text and how people use text in terms of speaking for the text and what text they bring in, which is kind of interesting, particularly in with executives during organizational change. So that's kind of the big picture. And Dr. Curran, who's one of the leaders in this area of ventriloquism, is on our dissertation committee. So basically, I thought it's a really interesting idea. It's new to me, but I can see how it would definitely could be an interesting theoretical lens to and method actually to look at some of the areas we're talking about.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That is fascinating to hear about, especially the method, because I think we're at the stage where we have a lot of ideas around a new kind of ontology or new perspectives, but the method side is where maybe there's some even more work to be done. Catherine, would you like to talk about your comment regarding fear and subject versus object?
So just so you know where I'm speaking from, not physically, but conceptually, is I'm part of a chaplaincy, a 2-year chaplaincy training program that I joined that Roshi Joan Halifax has created and has been running for 15 years at Upaya in New Mexico. So Upaya means skillful means. So it's interesting we're talking about methods because that's what Upaya really means, is having skillful methods. And this chaplaincy is to create chaplains that are not only chaplains for individuals as we have them historically, but for the earth. So I've stepped into that space being really clear that I have no idea how to do it, right? No idea. And also that I wanted to find another place to speak from rather than my scholarly expertise, but some kind of place that is some combination of from heart and connection with something larger than me. So I know that I don't know how to speak, Bobby, for, I won't say the river, because where I am, I look out and I see San Francisco Bay and I see hills and I see the sky. But if I think I'm speaking for the sky, who the heck am I to speak for the sky? Really, really, really. No matter how much I train in awareness, what hubris is there to think that I speak for the sky or those hills that I see? So I'm really interested, I'll just finish. I'm really interested in exploring this because that is what I want to learn how to do, is speak with and from these forces without it simply being hubris.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And that is my basic criticisms of this rights discourse. It's very individualistic, right, at one level. And it precisely assumes that hubris in a way. So rather than, and what they've done in this of the New Zealand case, they have a a group of people consisting of the tribal council as well as representatives from the government who will do this, right? That doesn't really solve the hubris question, but at least it is not one person talking about this. But you're right, and this is the fundamental problem I have with any legal case when it comes to this stuff, is that A, how is it going to be enforced, and B, who is going to decide who speaks for this person? In this particular case, the notion of the community is also interesting. It's a very problematic concept. It assumes this homogeneous kind of community in there, and sometimes it isn't in a way, right? Have these cases come to court yet? Apart from a few litigious ones, no, not yet. And that's going to be the interesting part, where this becomes pretty much symbolic. The examples I gave you both in Ecuador and Bolivia and in India, the development projects are on full swing. What does that then mean to have these rights? So this is what Hannah Arendt said, human rights is pretty much pointless. It is a right to have rights. That's about what it is. It doesn't really have much bearing on the ground.
Thank you. Just to kind of, I think, wrap up what I'm saying and some implications for action implications. One is that there is a woman I know who's never participated in this conference, but who will tomorrow, whose name is Patricia Wilson. She's a professor at the University of Texas at Austin in the School of Architecture. So see, that's going beyond our normal boundaries of discourse, who I've invited in to speak at a session we're having at 11:30 that's about mindfulness and societal change. I don't know the exact title, but that's roughly it. And it's definitely 11:30 and it's virtual tomorrow. Okay. And she has done a lot of work with community engagement in peri-urban settings in Mexico. So anyway, that's one thing about that. And then also, I was recently, in terms of methodology going forward and groups within the academy, I was recently elected as a representative to the MSR board, a general rep. And general is the only job role that hasn't been defined, which is great. I love undefined roles. So it seems to me that this question of relating humans and the non-human and talking about that is something that could take place further within MSR and that people would be very interested there. And if we could figure out some way to dialogue with people here and there, maybe we could explore that further in that context, and I might be able to help shepherd that. It seems like a really important area of how the heck we do this, linking community, not thinking we're speaking from somebody, and delusional, and yet actually connecting with the more than human world.
Thank you, Catherine. I will follow. I've got a note to follow up with you about those opportunities. And unfortunately, just as we're into the meat of a very fascinating conversation, we're out of time. So we're going to wrap up in the next 3 minutes here and talk about next steps. And also I'm going to describe how I would like to share all of the resources that we've talked about and all of the resources that we have collected as the organizing team with all of you. And I would like to describe how we're going to do that. Okay, so where are we at? We are past this, we are doing that. Future steps. Okay, so we shared this this link early on in the chat. Costanza, can you put that link back in the chat?
I will do it.
Thank you. And the QR code will also get you there. Please sign up on that form just with your contact information, and we will send all of the follow-up information that we've covered here, as well as the resources that we have, as well as the schedule for the next meeting. And the way that this is going to work is we envision doing kind of a large co-authored project. So there are some papers in other fields, especially that have 20, 30 authors. So we're kind of envisioning whoever wants to work on this, very much want you involved. We're going to have a series of work meetings. To be a co-author on the paper, you'll have to attend the work meetings and contribute to what we're doing. There might be some other ways to contribute in the background if you can't attend the work meetings, but we will send an email to that list to keep everyone updated. I want to give Costanza and Bobby a chance for final comments here before we wrap up. We do have 5 minutes after 3:45, so it won't just cut us off, but we want to respect all of your time and be formally done by 3:45.
Costanza, you go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who attended the session, because they never like I didn't expect so many people. So thank you. And thank you for the collective effort in the brainstorming. Didn't expect so many contributions and so good with the technology. So thanks everyone. And Bobby, on you.
Nothing, just enjoyed the comments. I'm really looking forward to looking at the comments of the Padlet. This is a conversation which we have to continue. And I guess when you're doing your next paper, your next project or anything, I guess just think about what that means in the work we are doing. You know, what would that look like? And somebody made a point that rather than thinking about who's going to speak for a particular non-human, what does that mean in my own work? And I'm beginning to ask this question myself, and it's hard. It's not that easy. But thanks everybody for your input, and we will continue this conversation.
That concludes our formal program. So if you need to go, please feel free to leave. Thank you so much for your time. We're all going to hang out for another 5 minutes if you'd like to just kind of informally chat. Have a great rest of the conference, everyone.
Yep, enjoy Seattle for those of you who are there. Great.
Costanza, the Padlet kind of continues to exist in the cloud, correct? How do we distribute that to folks?
We can make a PDF or download it in many different ways. So
Great.
You can be creative about it.
Well, thank you. Just to say hello, and we've never met, and it's good to meet you. And it's fascinating to get input that helps me see that what I'm thinking about is being thought about in vastly different ways by people I don't know, and somehow be able to connect with them, because I knew that it's being thought about by people I don't know, but connecting in this way and knowing we're in the academy is sort of fun.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I'm so glad you decided to join us today.
Yeah, well, it was good fortune that I recognized Bobby's name over the years, but we've never met, I don't think either, but
I was at the MSR. I did a talk at the MSR last year with a panel. There were a few indigenous scholars in that panel as well.
So I think actually where I know your name from is the Practice Theme Committee, when I was chair of that many years ago.
Okay, could be. Well, glad to have you on board. So excellent.
So I don't know whether I'll be able to work with you on this paper or not, because I'm committed to a bunch of things, but I did sign up, so I'd be informed.
Absolutely great. Yeah, we'll be sending out the next plan within probably a few weeks once we recover from the conference.
From Zoom, actually.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Catherine.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye. Good meeting you.
Thank you. Bye.
Nicolas.
Hi, Simone. How are you?
Hi, Nicolas. Hi, Costanza and Bobby. Thanks for the session, and it was very, very interesting. I'm just wondering about the project that you have in mind. Is the focus of the project being on the legal status of nature, or on the relational ontology regarding human and nature? Because I'm not sure they are perfectly correlated. I mean, in what exists out there. So do you want to do a review on more legal tradition or on the ontological tradition?
Yeah, I think this is still the question that we're going to answer in the next stage of the project, because I think Costanza is coming from it from the ontological side, and I'm coming more from the legal rights side. But that will, and you've highlighted that those two directions that we could take it. But that will be part of the conversation of the people who want to be involved.
Okay, thanks. In any case, great idea. I like the project. So
yeah, thanks for joining us, Simone. It's good to have you here. Ajit, did you want to?
Yes, I seem to have messed up the timing, because I've come in at a time when this is ending, when I thought it was just about to begin at 12:45, according to Seattle time. I'm very sorry to have missed the session. Is it recorded, and will I be able to view it again?
Yes, it should. It was recorded, and it will be available on the AOM platform for, I'm not sure how long, but you should be able to see it there.
I plan to see it today itself if it's available.
Yeah, that's great.
And I only wanted to say that I am working on this subject for some time, and especially on water. And I've been working in Rajasthan on the revival of rivers that have died. And there's a case that was taken to the Rajasthan High Court on this question of who owns rainwater. Because when you create check dams as part of water harvesting, you would end up having to collect rainwater. And if the irrigation department believes, as it does from the colonial times, that water belongs to the state, then you run into a peculiar problem. So we took a case to the Rajasthan High Court. The High Court was not able to handle it.
Yeah.
It was never decided. But in the meantime, there's a lot of other things that have been happening, including the rights of rivers. So I've been involved with this work for a number of years. And I have a continuing project on this question of who owns rainwater. And again, this has those mythological linkages from, for example, in Indian mythology, Varuna is one of the gods. And so the idea of the clouds and the Indra, so all that mythology is part of it, but there's also the question of sustainability, questions of SDG in this, because it's also about recycling, harvesting, water conservation, environment protection, and a whole host of issues like that. So that's where I am, and I'm so sorry that I didn't come in at the right time. I seem to have messed up the time.
Were you able to see the sign-up form so that we can stay in touch with you?
I have done that. I have seen the sign-up form.
Excellent.
I have noted it down quickly, so I'm going to sign up.
Okay, I wrote down your name. I'll follow up with you too. Go ahead, Bobby.
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to Jamal.
Yeah, thank you, Jamal, for the tech support in the background. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think we're about to get kicked off. Go ahead, Costanza.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, a question to Jamal. So when will the registration will be online? Just to, if you can hear me.
He may not be there anymore.
Well, whatever. But I'm sure you will find the recording online soon.
Oh, he put in the chat that he's not sure when the recording will be available.
Okay, great.
Well, no problem. No problem.
Bobby, I think we should wrap up and say goodbye. Thank you so much, Bobby.
Thank you.
Lovely to stay together.
We'll be in touch.
Ciao.
Yes, goodbye, everyone.
Lovely to come across you. I look forward to meeting you before long.
Absolutely.
Like Nicholas and Constanza, I also look forward to meeting you before long. Are you in Seattle?
No, fortunately not.
I am
online.
In Seattle.
Someday we will be in the same place.
All right. Someday we will meet.
Yes.
Yes.
Goodbye.
But I should pass by India in October in case.
Please come. I will be there. Send me a mail. We will definitely meet.
If you're in Delhi,
India, where would you be landing?
I will be landing in Delhi.
Wonderful. Then we will definitely meet. Just let me know the date so I make sure I'm in town.
Perfect. Bye. Ciao.
Goodbye.